So here's Chuck. Now you can all see Chuck and you have a common understanding of who Chuck is. So Chuck is 42 years old, likes wine, likes Lady Gaga. Okay, so you're bringing everybody onto the same page. And, you know, it is something that a lot of companies often don't do because for various reasons, differing founders may have different opinions about who they are targeting. In fact, even one founder of a company may have different ideas about who their customer is because they can't decide. They're trying to design a product for this person and for that person and for that person, and they don't have a holistic view of who the customer is. But the main thing is you're trying to have a very homogeneous type of customer that you're producing a homogeneous type of product for, and you have a homogeneous sales process for that product, for that person as well. So as I say, whether it's your investor, whether it's your developer, whether it's your sales team, they are all now aiming towards the same type of customer. And again, sales is another good example because salespeople will obviously want to try and sell as much of product as possible, but it makes it difficult if they're not all selling to the same homogeneous type of person, because you know they're going to have to try and tailor their sales pitch towards different types of people, which can be more challenging as well because it's changing from time to time. So here's Chuck. It should be a real person. That's the main thing to mention here. So when you're describing the persona of Chuck, it should be actually a real person with various characteristics. So this is a particular product which is in the area of data servers, and it's to do with a solution for as far as I remember, it's water cooling for the heat system in a server plant. And what we have here is we have the persona of Chuck, who you've just seen on the previous slide, who is the person who's going to ultimately sign off on this data server. So you can see quite a lot of information here in terms of, you know, what we call the demographics. So, you know, American, lives here, went to college here, this family, mid-career, and so on. But you also have a little bit about the psychographics in terms of the things that are important to him. So at the very bottom of the slide here, you see reliability, growth, costs, greenness. These are things that are important to him in terms of his job. So the priorities, reliability, growth, and so on. And then there's information about where Chuck gets his information from, the websites he reads, the things he's interested in, like the Uptime Institute, looking at Green Grid magazine, reading blogs about this topic. So you want to have this very fully fledged description of Chuck, the persona of Chuck, and as I say, ranging from the demographics, which is more, let's say, the statistical information, to the psychographics in terms of understanding Chuck's mindset, what's important to him in terms of family, and what's important to him in terms of life. Okay, so I say a real person, and as much information as you can have there as possible. Again, this is bringing everybody onto the same page, so that when the salesperson is trying to sell, they have a very good idea of that person and what their priorities are. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to interrupt. That's good too, because we have a lot of stuff and you may not want to wait to the end. That's okay as well. Okay, so I say real person, visual even better. Like, we don't have a picture of Chuck in this particular slide, but we have a graphic representation there. You could have a photograph of Chuck. You want to kind of have a realization of this person, this real person. Understanding all the dimensions, the rational, emotional, social. Too much detail is fine, and then you can take away stuff that just may not be relevant. So the most important things are really around the priorities. So what are their dreams? What are their fears? What do they, and both, as I say, from the work and from the personal side, what are their motivations? What we're trying to get at ultimately is the top two priorities of Chuck, because later on when you're talking about what you can do for your customer, you're talking about a proposition that Chuck wants. So understanding their top two priorities is very important, because you're creating your value proposition usually aligned to those top two priorities. So it's important to have this, like you are going to talk to a lot of people through your primary market research. You are going to be gathering a lot of data about potential customers. You're trying to find the most common profile, the one that sits in the middle, and that their priorities would be replicated amongst multiple people, so that the priorities of Chuck will be the same priorities experienced by 10,000, let's say, types of Chuck. What watering holes does Chuck go to? Where do they meet? What blogs do they read? What magazines do they read? Where do they get their influence from? If they're taking a decision to buy a product, you know, where is it likely they're going to see similar types of products? It's important to build this persona as a team. So rather than one person in the founding team deciding what the persona is, get everybody to do it together, because then you're all on the same wavelength, but you're also in agreement in terms of, yes, this is the person we're targeting. Because again, having this disconnect between different people's, different founders' opinions of who the persona is can be quite disruptive. Okay, so builds the persona, develop persona as a team. Even in I suppose if you think of it in terms of pitches, this kind of person-driven angle has a lot more impact. There's a parallel here, I suppose, to ads. You know, you've probably seen many of the ads for charities where they talk about a person as opposed to the big numbers. In the past week or two, I've been reading a lot of stories about impact on the climate. So we've had lots of, you know, let's say big numbers in terms of, you know, the amount of the species being wiped out over the past 40 years, the number of years until temperature rises by this amount, the overall very big impact. And it can be quite difficult because you get, I suppose, lost or scared by these very big numbers and very big situations that you feel you can have no control over. This is an approach here in the charity space where rather than talking about the 800 million people who don't have enough food and the amount of money that's needed, they focus on the person. So it's a story-driven one around Raj, who has a sister, goes to school but is lethargic, hasn't eaten for so many weeks, and there are, you know, you're focusing on the person, and everybody knows that this is a real person as opposed to a big number, and therefore you're more likely to I suppose inspire people to create impact if it's based on a person as opposed to a big statistic. So I have a question for you here. This was one you can have a think about for a minute, and then you can come back to me with an answer. In a startup, which of these is the biggest problem, or the bigger problem, I should say? Having enough time to research and figure out the best strategy, or motivating people to keep making progress so you can generate momentum and convince others to join your company? So I'll give you 30 seconds to think about this. I want you to tell me A or B and why.
I think A is more important right at the beginning, but then once you kind of have figured out A, then the problem is actually B, how to get people involved, maybe not paying them or paying very little, and go from step to steps.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, to me, it sounds like having enough time to research and figure out the best strategy initially is more important, actually.
John, for me, I would say problem A. Again, it's having enough time. And once you're in the business up and running, it's really hard to find a time to do a research and figure things out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that too, John. I think starting out with actually researching the problem from all angles would be better, because I'm not so sure you know what kind of people you need on your team right in the beginning.
Yeah. So there's definitely, you know, I think you'll find that people, you know, that they don't settle on one or the other, but there is certainly an argument to be said that if you can't have people to make it work, then you will get nothing done either. So I suppose sometimes people can waste a lot of time revisiting strategies without thinking about what are the people I need to have on board to make a strategy happen in the first place. So whether it's the balance of people in the company or convincing people to follow you. We had an interesting use case in one of the courses we did, which was basically two stories. One was around a person who was kind of, let's say, more about product, and the other was around a person who was more about culture and getting people to follow the culture of the company. And it turned out that the person who had no products in the beginning, but had managed to build up a culture of followers, was the more successful person in the end, because they basically had the people who believed in the vision, and they were able to have the momentum to move forward for various reasons. So I often think about SpaceX and their tagline of making us an interplanetary species. One whatever about the strategy, you know what the end point is that you're aiming towards, and you are bringing people on board who also believe in that end point. Okay, so making people into planetary species, it doesn't say exactly how you're going to do it, but it does certainly get people inspired to be part of that cause or vision or mission, if you want to call it that. That, you know, that's kind of what we're heading towards. So it's you know, if you're to say which one is more important, well, obviously if you don't have a good strategy, you're going to have problems in the first place. But if you don't have people to work with you on it, then, you know, limited resources can only get you so far. So it is very important to get people on board to generate the momentum. So I agree with you. Certainly in the beginning, there's probably a bit more about, well, what strategy am I going to go for? But as you grow later on, you want to have more people aligning to that. And I suppose even what we talked about there in terms of Chuck and making people understand of the person you're trying to provide your solution for is again part of that story in terms of convincing people that this is the person you're targeting, this is what you're trying to do, and therefore bringing them along with you is going to be an easier sell as well. So we've got two products here. We have the Honest Company from Jessica Alba, and we have a Kia K900 car. I'm not sure if any of you have seen this car before. This is LeBron James, the basketball player. The main premise of this, I suppose, is again, this is part of is the person who's advertising a product persona, or is it something that's maybe the persona is aspiring to be? So you know, sometimes you're selling a product not so much on the, you know, the typical customer, but rather the understanding of who that customer aspires to or is inspired by. So we have we've people, I suppose, and they've got certain heroes that they kind of look up to, and that's part of I suppose understanding the persona and, you know, who they respect or admire. So again, it's not maybe typical of the person you're selling the product to. It's probably unlikely that LeBron James is going to be driving a Kia K900, but you are saying to people that, or you're trying to develop an understanding of your persona and their heroes essentially. So Chuck, lying here in the middle of our bell curve, and yes, not everybody is like Chuck, but again, they are representative of the most average person in our persona, and there will be outliers. So again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a feeling from talking to your potential customers of their common traits, their common demographics, common psychographics, and then you pick a person in the middle who is most representative of the large bunch there in the middle. So where most people are lying, who will be the most representative there in the middle. So, and that's a combination of the demographic and psychographic traits. So it's not easy, but again, it does give you a very clear focus point. And when you're telling your story to investors as well later on, if you can say that, you know, here's Chuck, and Chuck is 42 years old and likes wine, likes Lady Gaga, and he is a data server manager based in Boston, and he has a big issue in terms of cooling costs for his data center because for various reasons, you know, the costs are increasing and the energy requirements of the data center are increasing, and he needs to have a solution that's bring down the cost but is also reliable. And his two top priorities are reliability and something else. And therefore you're building a story around a real person who has a real problem. And then you're saying, and actually there's 10,000 people like Chuck in the US who are also managing data centers, and that's who we're selling to. And because our solution is better in these dimensions, that's why Chuck and his core would be willing to buy it. So you're using this persona for multiple reasons. It's to bring, I suppose, everybody in your team onto the same page, also to bring your investors onto the same page as you in terms of who you're selling to.